and welcome to this special broadcast on India's Prime Minister's visit to Poland. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will conclude his two-day visit to Poland on Thursday before heading to neighboring Ukraine. India-Poland ties have been elevated to a strategic partnership. Both sides have agreed on new initiatives and agreements. Over the next 1 hour, we will look at how this visit is giving a boost to India-Poland bilateral and regional ties, besides raising Europe's profile in India's foreign policy, particularly in view of its outreach to Central Europe, and how India could be a credible voice of the global South and a potential peacemaker in a conflict-ridden part of the world in view of its constant advocacy for dialogue and diplomacy. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed a joint press statement with Polish PM Donald Tusk. In his address, Prime Minister Modi said that the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and West Asia are a matter of deep concern, and India firmly believes that no problem can be solved on the battlefield, while noting that the loss of innocent lives in any crisis has become the biggest challenge for humanity.
यूक्रेन और पश्चिम एशिया में चल रहे संघर्ष हम सभी के लिए गहरी चिंता का विषय है। भारत का यह दृढ़ विश्वास है कि किसी भी समस्या का समाधान रणभूमि में नहीं हो सकता। किसी भी संकट में मासूम लोगों की जान की हानि पूरी मानवता के लिए सबसे बड़ी चुनौती बन गई है। हम शांति और स्थिरता की जल्द से जल्द बहाली के लिए डायलॉग और डिप्लोमेसी का समर्थन करते हैं।
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi hailed the historic ties that India and Poland share. PM Modi said that on the 70th anniversary of establishment of diplomatic ties, both the nations have decided to transform the relationship into a strategic partnership.
संबंधों को एक नई दिशा देने के लिए कई इनिशिएटिव्स की पहचान की है। दो लोकतांत्रिक देशों के रूप में हमारी पार्लियामेंट के बीच आदान प्रदान को बढ़ावा दिया जाना चाहिए। आर्थिक सहयोग को व्यापक रूप प्रदान करने के लिए प्राइवेट सेक्टर को जोड़ने के लिए काम किया जाएगा। फूड प्रोसेसिंग के लिए क्षेत्र में पोलैंड वर्ल्ड लीडर्स में से है। हम चाहते हैं कि पोलैंड की कंपनियां भारत में बनवाए जा रहे मेगा फूड पार्क से जुड़े। भारत में तेज गति से हो रहे शहरीकरण से वाटर ट्रीटमेंट, सॉलिड वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट, अर्बन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, ऐसे क्षेत्रों में हमारे सहयोग के नए अवसर खुल रहे हैं।
Addressing the joint press meeting in Warsaw, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said that discussions were held on strengthening cooperation in the area of defense and trade. He added that Poland is ready to take part in India's defense modernization.
Poland is ready to take part in India's defense modernization. We have the necessary technological capability and experts. India is global leader in the field of artificial intelligence, and we are using this technology in several areas, including defense. We express gratitude to you for inviting our companies to your country. We want investment in the field of defense and that we cooperate with each other.
Polish PM Donald Tusk also said that the entire world praises India because the Indian government is very democratic. He added that PM Modi is committed to bringing about a peaceful and just end to the conflict in Ukraine.
Not only on defense but on various issues, our understanding has enhanced. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is committed to further deepen India-Poland relationship. PM Modi is also willing to cooperate with European Union. I am confident that PM Narendra Modi will play a very crucial role.
Earlier, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi received a ceremonial welcome at the Federal Chancellery in Warsaw on Thursday. Upon arrival at the Federal Chancellery, PM Modi was received by his Polish counterpart Donald Tusk. Prime Minister Modi held one-on-one bilateral talks with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk in Warsaw. The leaders agreed to elevate India-Poland relations to a strategic partnership. Discussions covered diverse areas of bilateral ties, including trade and investment, science and technology, defense and security, cultural and people-to-people connections. Leaders also exchanged views on regional and global issues of mutual concern. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk hosted Prime Minister Modi for lunch. India and Poland also held delegation-level talks after the one-on-one bilateral talks between Prime Minister Modi and his Polish counterpart Donald Tusk. Both leaders held discussions on a wide range of issues. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval were also present at the talks. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar met his Polish counterpart in Poland. The minister on social media platform said that the two leaders discussed the Ukraine conflict, Indo-Pacific situation and bilateral cooperation. The minister also said that Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit will give a fresh impetus to India-Poland ties. And joining us now for Perspective is Professor Umu Salma Bawa with School of International Studies, JNU. Such a pleasure to have you, Professor Bawa, on this special broadcast, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Poland. For starters, tell us, what should one infer from the fact that in a year that marks 70th anniversary of India-Poland diplomatic ties, both sides have agreed to elevate the partnership to a strategic one?
I think, first of all, one should welcome the decision on the occasion of the 70th anniversary. It's a long history on the one hand, but it also cements a relationship which has moved across a political spectrum divided by a period of Cold War. And India continued to have very strong relations with Poland. And now in the changed geopolitics of the region and the larger geopolitical context of the world, I think this is a very, very welcome development that both sides have decided to elevate the relationship to a strategic partnership.
Absolutely. And within its realm, what are the sectors that you expect cooperation to further strengthen in? Because we know that there is already defense cooperation between India and Poland. In 2003, a defense cooperation agreement was signed. Then recently, the defense wing was opened in the Indian embassy in Warsaw. So how could both sides really take it forward? Prime Minister Tusk did refer to defense modernization.
So I think one has to look at this upgradation to a strategic partnership from a very holistic perspective. There's the political side, there's an economic side, there is a very important security element, and of course then there is a socio-cultural element to it. So if one were to integrate all of that, then we can also see that given Poland's strategic location in the east, and India's growing engagement with the European Union. On the one hand, we're looking at concluding a free trade agreement with the European Union. The Polish economy is also one of the largest economies within the European Union. And it has strategic advantage in certain sectors. There's a very high adoption of the digital, for example, digital technology in Poland. And Poland is also leading in military technology. Now, there is commonality. If you look at the digital sphere, India is also leading in digital public infrastructure and digital public goods. That also is a win-win for both sides when you look at in terms of the business services on the digital side, which are located in Poland. Specifically to address your question on the military modernization, I think it's a very important agenda item for India, given the shift in the geopolitics in our region and in the larger, what I would name as the Indo-Pacific. As India seeks, to build up and strengthen its military and to modernize it, I think we're also looking at augmenting the kind of countries with whom we will partner in this military modernization. And I think that is indicative not only of the new military relations in the bilateral, but also the fact that we have expanded to add a military wing in our presence in the embassy in Warsaw.
Professor Bawa, if we expand the discussion to look at India's relationship with Central Europe, do you think that immediately after independence, there were several decades when Europe was not in the list of priorities of India, but has that changed particularly in the last 1 decade? And now is India focusing on Central Europe?
So I think when you look at India-Europe relations, you'll obviously have to look at it over very different timelines. If you look at it from the post-45 to the 90 period, then we've had a very robust relationship with the countries across this divide of what we call the Cold War. So not only with Western Europe, but very strongly also with countries in Central and Eastern Europe. And Poland is in that second camp of the Central and Eastern Europe. As we expanded that bilateral relation, what became the European Coal and Steel Community and subsequently the Economic Community, it has also led to very strong relations with countries in Western Europe. For example, with Germany and France, India has a strategic partnership. Now, when you look at the countries in Eastern Europe and the transformation which has taken place, especially in Poland, I was in Poland last year in November. I've seen for myself over a period of a decade how much of transformation has taken place, the rapid economic growth, absorption of technology. There is a different mood on the ground. And I think what you see now is also India's foreign policy engaging what I would call as strategic multiple options in the shifting, economic and political choices which become available in the context of multiple factors. And one factor which cannot be ignored, which also is part of the discussion between both the leaders of India and Poland, is the fact of the war in Ukraine. So I think it also shows, the importance that India lays to the locational geography of Poland, but also that the entire region has for a long time also been receiving Indian students, for example. Poland is also having a very good education system. So there are multiple factors. We are building on the old, but we are taking the strategy forward in a new direction.
Okay. If we come to the subsectors of cooperation, then we heard the Prime Minister speak of the multiple opportunities that are there in India for the Polish companies. He spoke about Make in India, Make for the World. He spoke about renewable energy. He spoke about how Poland can learn from Indian experiences in space and other sectors. So commercially speaking, how could both the economies benefit from each other, considering that Poland is one of the largest economies in Europe and there is a good amount of trade that happens bilaterally worth $6 billion between India and Poland?
So I think there are two sides to it. One is, of course, this political understanding between India and Poland, and that kind of frames the business opportunity, because ultimately business has to find its own kind of the level. But the political, what it does is it expands the space, it gives assurance, and it also sets the stage for business to then pick up. So if you look at what the Prime Minister has said, to come to India, invest in not only the Atmanirbhar Bharat, but make in India, and use India as a hub to export to other parts of the world. That's a win-win for both the Polish companies and for India. There's tremendous growth opportunity in India. The Polish companies would benefit tremendously by coming over here. So this kind of a political assurance, when it comes at the level of a meeting like this, especially in the backdrop of the 70 years, more than 45 years have elapsed since an Indian Prime Minister has visited Poland, that's a very strong political message that the Prime Minister is giving to the business community to come and be part of the India story, if I should put it that way. And the benefits would also be on the other side, right? I mean, Indian companies are also looking to go into Poland. So Poland is also inviting the Indian companies, and that is where one will see where the synergies can lie. For example, I identified digital, military. We're already looking at agriculture. So there is technology as well, where there are niche industries where Poland would be also able to offer assistance to India, and where I think business on both sides can now take this forward.
Are people really at the heart of this relationship, besides, of course, the strategic value that this relationship has, Professor Baba? Because the Prime Minister said that for the welfare of skilled professionals and workers, and in order to boost mobility, both sides have decided to enter into what he said, a social security agreement. So do you think that, considering that there are many students there in Poland and there is a youth exchange program also that the Prime Minister had announced in his community address and reiterated today, under which 20 Polish youth would be coming to India every year to understand Bharat better, what do you make of people-to-people ties between the two countries? And we've seen how the Indian Maharajas, called good Maharajas in the 1940s, also showed their generosity, which is also a pillar of strength in this relationship.
Yes, you very rightly pointed out. There's the story of the good Maharaja of Navanagar or Jamnagar, and his role during Second World War in saving Polish children and Polish women. And that is a historical fact which is kind of, repeated down generations. And that's the fact that it echoes even till today tells you about the strong, historical connect between both sides. But it's time to, reinvent the relationship. History is a good place to start, but we've got to look at it in the context of the current, present, what is happening. The Indian youth are extremely, there is ambition, there is drive, there is skill, and we today see a large number, going to countries where they've never gone before in the past. It also tells you about their adaptability. On the other hand, I think what is extremely important, and one should read this social security, agreement in this larger context, also between India and the European Union, and in terms of also, protecting and facilitating resources for the diaspora. So between India and the European Union, we're also looking at what has been discussed is the Migration and Mobility Pact. Now, this is to facilitate what we call as legal migration, a skilled workforce across various categories. There is a big demand for skilled labor in Europe. That's also the case in Poland. So I think what's important in looking at it is to see that the conditions are met, that the people who are traveling from India, their rights are protected. And so one should look at the social security agreement in this larger context of one, the larger India-European Union bilateral relations, which is also enhancing a migration and mobility. So the equivalent of a green card, you have the blue card, skilled workers over here. And on the other hand, the very specifics, which then is negotiated bilaterally, with the respective country, whichever the case may be. And now, of course, it's the Prime Minister talking in Poland with regard to the social security agreement. So I think these are very welcome developments which lay a framework and also, will see to it that it will enhance what we would call as legal migration.
How could India stand to gain from Polish expertise in the food processing sector? Because that is one sector that Prime Minister did single out in his press statement at a time when the global south, the developing world, is facing a food crisis because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We know that Ukraine is a granary of the world, and there was a Black Sea initiative which was called off. So going forward, how can the mega food parks in India stand to gain from the food processing expertise of Polish companies?
So I think food is a very important sector, and today we talk about food security. Now, India has, become self-sufficient in many food grains, but we are not able to extend the shelf life. Agricultural products have a very short shelf life, and unless not, converted, you tend to lose. And if you think of the cost which has gone into the, the growing of the food, if it's not enhanced, that is where agri-tech and agro-production and food processing comes in. And in terms of that, Poland itself has a large sector, is a large agricultural-based economy in the past, and has technology. And I think that would be a win-win for us in terms of gaining from the expertise that Polish agro industry has, in terms of converting uh, what we have as either surplus, food produce, or in terms of expanding and extending the shelf life of products in such a way that the effort of the farmers in growing, food is taken forward. It's a net gain to the economy. Also, it creates multiple products from the single product which is available. It also generates employment, brings in, growth and mobility in various areas where there is large-scale farming taking place in India. And more importantly, also, from a perspective of employment, which is extremely important in India, generating rural employment is important. We have to look at ways in which, not only of looking at how our industry can benefit, in urban areas, but how do you link the rural and the urban with such agro products and technology, which generates enough employment in rural India. So I think that is where we will see a very big win-win on both sides.
Right. The Prime Minister also spoke about opportunities in India as a result of urbanization. He spoke of the need for water treatment infrastructure, urban infrastructure as a whole, solid waste management. As India has set a goal for itself to become Viksit or developed by 2047, how can a developed country in Europe, that is Poland and India, work together to have the next generation infrastructure which is absolutely required to reach that level of development by 2047?
So, looking forward to the next, 25 years to become this developed India will require a tremendous push in many sectors. And wherever any country has that technology or has that kind of advantage, I think India will benefit from that. At the end of the day, you can't just simply take a technology and transport it to another country. There are, specific requirements in every country. But what it will help us do is to also be able to look at the different kind of technologies which are available today in the market, and probably find a better, partnership or matchmaking of technology which can address India's specific needs. As India moves towards, rapid, urbanization, it also means that our cities have to also become far more resilient. Our cities have to become far more sustainable. And already we are experiencing, for example, at present, water crises. We have to look at, as the cities grow, urban planning, smart cities is extremely high on the agenda for the Indian government. This requires multiple things. Not only does it require an infusion of capital, it also requires a lot of technology to be brought in. So anything which has produced a successful solution in third countries could offer us a very good example of how that could be then localized for our own advantage to address some of the challenges over here. And I think in that sense, Poland could be a very good partner for India.
And when the Prime Minister says that renewable energy, clean coal technology, green hydrogen and artificial intelligence are common priorities, and how India and Poland can really combine their strengths for a green future, then what are the vistas of cooperation that we are looking at? Because the Prime Minister on different occasions has been emphasizing how India, within the G20 particularly, has done better than all the other countries when it comes to meeting the Paris Climate Agreement commitments.
So it's true. I mean, India has been, taking major steps to reach its commitments within the Paris Accords. But I think, this still requires a lot of work. I think one of the biggest impact, not only for India, but for Poland and globally, has been the years of COVID, which has impacted our development agenda and our ability to meet the 2030 SDGs. So in that framework, if we look at it, then we still have many tasks which require, to be done both singularly as a country, but also in terms of partnerships. they are important. As Poland and as part of the European Union, their own push for a green economy, the absorption of zero emissions. They also talk about having taxes on other countries. So it's important to see that India's development, task is not subjected to some kind of what I would call as non-tariff barriers. And it's important that we approach it from a partnership which facilitates that India is also able to, meet its other targets on other commitments that it has given, both at the international level and in terms of internally, domestically, what is also promised. So I think whether it's the green economy, whether it is in terms of the location of Poland itself on the logistics corridor, both in terms of the north-south grid and in terms of the east-west, Poland is also, geostrategically located at what one could call as the gateway from the east to the rest of Europe. So if we are able to synergize in terms of what we can do in the economy, I think we will stand to really benefit, both in terms of addressing some of the challenges of climate change, but also in terms of looking at how we could, look at specific things which could be developed for countries in the global south. Let's not forget we've just had the third Voice of the Global South summit in India, uh, and that's a good reminder that partnerships like this can produce not only for us bilaterally but also for third countries.
Right. We'll take the discussion forward, but before that, let's bring our viewers up to speed with what's expected on day 2 of a Prime Minister's visit to Poland. And Prime Minister has numerous lineups on his second and final day of his visit to Poland. This includes talks with President Andrzej Duda, the Polish president, on Thursday. PM Modi will also lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier and meet President Andrzej Duda of Poland as a part of his visit to the nation. PM Modi will also meet the business leaders and Polish influencers before departing for Kiev. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited the monument to the Battle of Monte Cassino during his Poland visit and honored the Polish soldiers' bravery in the Second World War. The monument, unveiled in 1999, commemorates the heroic efforts of the Second Polish Corps and reflects the enduring bond between Poland and its allies.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi laid a wreath and paid tribute at the monument of the Battle of Monte Cassino in Poland. The monument commemorates the sacrifice and valor of soldiers from Poland, India and other countries who fought alongside each other in the famous Battle of Monte Cassino in Italy during the Second World War. For the Prime Minister, it was a solemn moment to remember the valor of Indian soldiers who fought in World War II. Fought from May 11 to May 18, 1944, the Battle of Monte Cassino was a crucial and intense engagement in World War II. The battle was fiercely contested, with the Allied forces suffering significant losses. The monument features a headless winged Nike emerging from a shattered column, symbolizing victory and resilience. The urn containing the ashes of the Polish heroes is draped with a shroud featuring the cross of Monte Cassino, adding a layer of solemnity and reverence to the memorial. The monument was officially unveiled on May 30, 1999, during the 55th anniversary of the battle. The monument to the Battle of Monte Cassino continues to serve as a poignant reminder of the valor of the Second Polish Corps and the broader Allied effort during World War II. Bureau Report, DD India.
Humanity and compassion are vital foundations of a just and peaceful world, depicting which Prime Minister Modi visited the Jam Sahib of Navanagar Memorial in Warsaw. During the Second World War, the Jam Sahib provided shelter to over 1,000 Polish children and is today fondly remembered as the Dobry, a good Maharaja in Poland. PM Modi paid homage at the memorial. Prime Minister Modi also paid homage at the Kolhapur Memorial, and there during the Second World War, a small village in Maharashtra named Walived became a beacon of hope for the Polish refugees. India stood up and welcomed approximately 6,000 Polish individuals who fled Soviet repression between 1942 and 1948. This memorial is a tribute to the great royal family of Kolhapur. The royal family was at the forefront of providing shelter to Polish women and children displaced due to the Second World War. Inspired by the ideals of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, the great royal family of Kolhapur put humanity above everything else and ensured a life of dignity for the Polish women and children. These are visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Warsaw paying homage to the tomb of the unknown soldier. Prime Minister is in Warsaw, the capital of Poland, on the first ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister in the last 45 years. A solemn occasion. Prime Minister Modi laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier in Warsaw. The tomb is dedicated to unknown soldiers who have given their lives for Poland. A monument to the fallen soldiers in Poland's 1,000-year history. The tomb of the unknown soldier serves as a symbolic grave for all those who died in war, whose remains have not been found or identified. 3 months after the suppression of the Warsaw Uprising, the palace was blown up on 27 December 1944. Miraculously, only a small section of the arcades survived, which included the tomb of the unknown soldier. On 8 May 1946, the monument was unveiled again. So the Prime Minister laying a wreath and thus paying tributes to the tomb of the unknown soldier, which is an honor for all those nameless soldiers who have died in war while defending Poland. And Professor Bawa, who is the professor with the Jawaharlal Nehru University, continues to be with us. Professor, we've seen over these 2 days, Prime Minister reaching out to the people of Poland and talking about the emotional connect. We were earlier talking about how 2 Indian Maharajas went to great lengths to provide refuge and shelter to Polish women and children, particularly during times of crisis during the Second World War. But do you think that paying his homage to the tomb of the unknown soldier also brings to the fore a historical connection? Because India and Indian soldiers and Polish soldiers did fight side by side even during the Second World War. So how much importance or significance would you give to this?
I think it's extremely important that the Prime Minister has, visited the tomb of the unknown soldier and laid a wreath over there, as we just saw. While it's a historical part, it's part of the joint history of India and Poland from, Second World War. What is important to recognize over here is that, it's the common effort which was put by both countries in terms of the conditions of 1945. And one has to recognize there were 2 elements to it. So while the Indian and Polish troops were fighting together, we also had the Indian Maharaja who was, taking these Polish children and women who came in. So there's a humanitarian element to what came out of it, and this issue of about jointly fighting the war in Europe. So I think they both symbolize 2 very important elements of our bilateral relation connected to the past, which still continues to have a very strong emotional resonance even today. And I think it's somewhere, the fact that these connections of the past are now being taken forward in a very new political setting, tells you about the strength of this relationship.
Professor Bawa, if we talk about India-Europe ties again, then we know that in January 2025, Poland will take over the presidency of the European Union. And now for the relationship between India and European Union, besides, of course, the India-Poland relationship, how significant could this visit be going forward, considering the upcoming position that Poland will have as EU president?
So I think, every 6 months for our viewers, the presidency rotates and one of the member states takes it up. It gives them the opportunity to, kind of set the agenda and take it forward during that 6-month period. So the Polish presidency, of course, is going to be influenced a lot by developments which are happening in Europe. That is of key concern to the countries of the European Union. And for those who are not aware, I mean, Poland is at a very geopolitical spot where, if there is any escalation in war, then Poland will face the brunt of it. It already has in terms of the refugee flows which have come into Poland. So that is going to be a very defining element in terms of the Polish presidency. But then it is also done along with, what is happening in Brussels. It's not independent of that. And one should also then keep in mind that in the summer, elections took place to the European Parliament. So as a new commission will come into office by November, and then by January, Poland takes over the presidency, there's going to be a new kind of dynamics at this point. So all the negotiations are on to build a new commission. It's going to be extremely crucial. How does Europe, move forward? And let me add one more element which adds complexity to all of this. And before I come to the India-Poland relationship, and that is not to forget that there are elections in America for the US president. And as the elections to the White House, the Electoral College takes place, it is going to really frame what happens from January 2025. Who will take, the oath as President of America in January is going to have a huge impact on not only European politics and economy, but more importantly, European security. So I think those are going to be very important framing questions. And India, as it looks to conclude the free trade agreement, is obviously it's not going to happen just now. It's going to spill into the next year. So we're going to be looking at the first half of next year, 2025, most likely under the Polish presidency when an India-EU FTA would be concluded.
Right. Professor Bava, continue to stay with us. Let's bring our viewers up to speed with the visuals that we are showing on screen. Prime Minister Narendra Modi laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier in Warsaw. This is a monument which is a tribute to the fallen soldiers in Poland's 1,000-year history. The grave houses a nameless soldier who defended Lviv from the Bolsheviks in 1920. There's a backstory to it. On 2nd November 1925, a 1.5-meter deep trench was dug in which the body of an unnamed soldier from Lviv was placed. On the coffin is written, "This coffin contains the body of the unknown Polish soldier taken from the grave in Lwów on 29th October 1925. On the gravestone, on the other hand, everyone can read these lines. Here lies a Polish soldier who fell for his home country. The monument is located in the arcades of the Saxon Palace. 3 months after the suppression of the Warsaw Uprising, from August to October 1944, this palace was blown up on 27th December 1944. But miraculously, only a small section of the arcades survived, which included the tomb of the unknown soldier. It was decided that the grave would remain in the same place. The ruins of the palace were later fortified and secured, and on 8th May 1946, this monument was unveiled again. In 1989, the soil from the Katyn graves was deposited in special vases. On 3rd May 1991, 14 more plaques were unveiled, engraved with the locations of the battles of 972 to 1683, 1768 to 1921, and 1939 to 1945. In total, there are 22 commemorative plaques that hang on the pillars. Yes, Professor Bava, we were discussing about what really the Polish presidency of the EU could mean as far as taking the relationship between India and EU forward. And you said that you expect the FTA negotiations to be concluded under the Polish presidency. Do you think that this visit is going to build a lot of trust to be able to have those achievements in near future?
So I'm an optimist by nature, and that's why I would hope that at least in the first half of the presidency under Poland that this goes through. That is my reason for being optimistic. I think it's a multi-level negotiation and engagement, and despite what are the political calendars, which sometimes don't match on both sides, we went into election first, and then the European Union had elections to the European Parliament. So as a consequence, what was expected to be concluded by end of the year has obviously now gone into a different timetable. I think this is where the bilateral relationships become extremely important, because they pick up, kind of an add, like another momentum to the larger relationship between India and the European Union. Each of the member states, under their own leadership or presidency, also get an opportunity to, enhance the larger India-EU relationship. So I think that will be definitely high on the agenda, and the Polish government will put in a lot of effort to see that it could be concluded, because then the credit also comes to under which presidency this happened. So there are a lot of, there's not just the optics of the bilateral relationship, but it's also about the substance. Going forward, I think the negotiations are, going on despite what other developments are taking place. The timetable of the negotiations, they continue to go on, but I think we will see greater speed once the new commission is in place in Brussels, and perhaps, also notwithstanding any further political developments in terms of the war between Russia and Ukraine.
Yes. Since you are referring to the war, do you expect a friendly nudge by Prime Minister Narendra Modi when he goes to Ukraine? Because even now, during the press statement with the Polish Prime Minister, both sides did refer to the conflict, and Prime Minister has often been saying that India believes that diplomacy and dialogue leading to a negotiated settlement is the only way forward. both sides should be party to a dialogue which leads to a negotiated settlement. Now is not the time of war, or now is not the era of war, and solutions cannot be found on the battlefield. Do you think that these are statements that the Prime Minister could be making to not just the Polish Prime Minister, maybe later today to the Polish President, and then to the Ukrainian President tomorrow?
Definitely. I think, if you put Prime Minister's visit in a larger context, one can't escape the fact that after visiting Poland, Prime Minister Modi is going to Ukraine. And that comes in the backdrop of Prime Minister's earlier visit to Moscow, where he met the Russian President, President Putin. Prime Minister has said right from 2022, that this is not the era of war. War in one geography of the world is not just limited in terms of its impact only to the countries or where it is taking place. It has ramifications for everybody. As you correctly pointed out earlier, Ukraine is also one of the large world food granaries. It has impacted food prices, pushing up big important questions on food security and threatening, lives in Africa, for example, pushing people towards malnutrition. Many people may not be aware that 75% of our own sunflower oils were being imported from, Ukraine. So I think any opportunity in which, one can bring conflicting parties to dialogue and diplomacy has to be pursued. And Prime Minister has, you can see, committed himself to this in the sense of, we're not trying to broker anything, because I think that requires very different kind of diplomatic action, guaranteeing peace and security. But India is probably one of the very few countries at this point in time, in the context of this conflict, which is able to talk to both sides. And I think that is important. I think everybody recognizes that. There will be also a message from Poland, I'm very sure, conveyed to Prime Minister Modi, as much as Prime Minister is talking about. So this requires a collective action and effort. War ultimately cannot be won in the battlefield. It will just lead to, a fatigue which is already setting in. There are also political commitments which states have given. The domestic politics may not want to come through with that in the European context. So I think the good offices of what Prime Minister Modi brings in this context is going to be extremely important, and we will have to clearly look at the wording of the documents which come out later today from Warsaw, but more importantly, what comes from Ukraine. That is going to be important, and I think that will give us a signal as to how any effort can be made in bringing conflicting parties to the table.
Yes, and we know there are several Ukrainian refugees also who are living in Poland. We'll come to that aspect as well. But before that, let's show you what DD India correspondent Vishal Baristo spoke to a survivor of a refugee camp in Andrey's Chindiesi. Let's take a look at that.
I have with me Mr. Kendensky, who is 88 years old and who's also the survivor of that refugee camp. How do you feel about this? I have the interpreter with us. How do you feel about this visit of the Prime Minister, and what memories do you get from those days?
Byłem w tym czasie, kiedy obok tego osiedla Valiwade był I chodził Mahatma Gandhi.
When he was in Valiwade settlement, at the same time there was time of Mahatma Gandhi movement, this peaceful movement developing.
You heard from Mr. Kendensky. He is reminded of his old days, days of Mahatma Gandhi, days of his childhood in India. And definitely India and Poland have a long way to go. And this visit of the Prime Minister would be the stepping stone between India and Poland, strong friendship. With cameraman Sanjeev from the Kolhapur Memorial in Monte Cassino, this is Vishal Baristo for DD India.
So that was a conversation that our correspondent was having with one of the survivors of the Second World War, a Polish citizen who was given refuge by the Indian Maharajas. Well, that is one aspect of the story. These are visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi with President Andrzej Duda of Poland. An extremely important partnership between India and Poland, because it's now been elevated to a strategic partnership. The first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Poland in 45 years. On a year that marks 70th anniversary of India-Poland diplomatic ties, they've decided to elevate the partnership to a strategic level. Earlier today, there were talks that the Prime Minister had with his Polish counterpart, the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, and now talks underway with the President of Poland, Andrzej Duda. Starting January 2025, Poland will take over the presidency of the European Union. So in the regional context as well, this partnership is extremely significant. Both the countries have common worldviews, a common approach to the regional tensions as well as global growth and development, because both sides agree there should be reform of the United Nations Security Council and various international bodies. Both sides agree on the need to combat terrorism. Both sides agree on the need to take forward partnership in clean energy. Both sides agree on taking forward the defense partnership. Both sides agree on improving trade and investment, on more Polish investment in India and more Indian investment in Poland. Later today, the Prime Minister will be meeting a select group of Polish businessmen as well, some Indologists as well as Kabaddi players too. There is a thriving Indian diaspora in Poland. There are around 25,000 Indians in Poland, many of whom are students. The Prime Minister has announced a scheme to help the Polish youth particularly know Bharat or India better, under which 20 Polish youth will be coming to India every year. Though this is the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 45 years, it seems a lot of ground has been covered during these 2 days of Prime Minister's visit to Poland. India's engagement with Europe is only increasing. We've seen that particularly in the last 1 decade, where there have been several visits by India to various the Prime Minister Narendra Modi particularly to various European countries. There have been several incoming visits from heads of state and government and other top officials from the European Union. And now Prime Minister Narendra Modi focusing particularly on Central Europe, earlier going to Vienna and now in Moscow, in fact in Warsaw. Let's go back now to a professor with the JNU. Ma'am, talking of the India-Polish partnership, do you think that, this is one partnership that has bridged whatever gap was there of the last 45 years? In these 2 days particularly, has a lot of ground been covered?
Definitely. I think you could say that the partnership has taken a turn in, like putting itself on a high-speed train now. And that means there is a new political will, which also recognizes the shift in, the times and how there are moments when, one has to reinvent and redesign a partnership. I think that's extremely important. When I was in Warsaw last year, I did hear in my talks with people that it's time that India looks at Poland differently. History is very good, all the emotional connections are good, but there needs to be a very pragmatic moving ahead. And I think those efforts have been done by the officials on both sides in conveying the message, and also in the sense of India also conveying that, yes, we are also looking at Poland differently, as much as Poland would look at India differently. Don't just look at us as a developing country, but that we are also in a position to jointly work together. So I think it's about finding a new strategic equation in your larger political understanding, locating it within the context of the specific geopolitical developments, which is happening in the region over there. Remember, it's a very, very delicate balance. India has a very strong relationship with Russia, that country today, has no access to the West right from Poland onwards. And Poland, is on that geopolitical divide, so to speak. So it's a very delicate balance. At the same time, Prime Minister conveying a message that look at Indian foreign policy today, it's engaging with all countries. There is value, and more importantly, there is a space on the political table to have independent talks and consultations with each of the countries. So it's a very, very clear message. And like you just pointed out, the visit, just a short while back, not only to Moscow, but to Vienna, to Austria. Now, again, we see the tandem visit happening to Poland, followed by Ukraine. I think this is also a message to the countries in the European Union that we value you as well, and we are looking at scaling up our partnership, but also to recognize that we have historical connections with other countries. So I think we can see a double effort happening. One, that the 70 years in the relationship between India and Poland today coming to a new era of a strategic partnership, which is recognizing the shift which is also undergone on both sides. At the same time, strategically balancing our diverse interest through these countries in the last just 1 month. You can see that from the Prime Minister's visit.
Absolutely. So on a larger scale, India moving from non-alignment to multi-alignment, like the Prime Minister said. And as far as the bilateral partnership goes, a big boost to India-Poland ties as both countries have decided to elevate the partnership to a strategic level. We'll thank you, Professor Bawa, for joining us on this special broadcast. That's it then in this special broadcast on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Poland. My colleague Shubhendu will join you next to take you through all the news in India and around the world. Stay tuned.